Okay. All right. I think today we're going to change things up a little bit. We're going to see if maybe we end up with some more people in here today. And if that happens, then I will go ahead and start the conversation about um, the ChatGPT Pro and just how AI assistants and things that are going to have such a drastic impact on productivity for the average worker is going to change the employment landscape in the future. But until maybe I see a couple of people in here, um, there's no point in having the entire conversation before there's even anybody here to talk to. So I think I'm just going to start with a little world building in our fantasy world. Last time we stopped off, we were building our elves. And so just kind of to go over and reiterate some of the things we discovered. With our world building, one of the most important things we've discovered so far is that um, proper nouns have a lot of contextual weight with ChatGPT. So if you ask the AI to build you a character or a city or an organization or anything like that, especially in a creative endeavor like building a world like this, then the AI has a lot of default context in what that name means. And so you can reference that default context simply by giving the AI the name. And the way I sort of tested that was I had the AI create a character for me, and the AI gave that character a name and a race. And then I went into a completely clean chat and told the AI to create me a character of that name and of that race. It was a half elf character. And when it created that half elf character of that race or of that name, it gave me an almost identical description 3 times in a row. There was a little creative flair in the different characters that was slightly different, right? It would describe, for example, this isn't actually one of the changes it made, but for example, it might describe the angular features of a half elf or that express the half elf heritage, and then on one of the other ones, it might say the pointed ears of this person betrayed their half elf heritage, or something like that. But whatever it was just selecting a very obviously elven feature and then saying that is what belied that they were part elven. And so, other than a little bit of creative flair like that, everything else, the character was had the same job, was always a similar alignment, always had a similar voice, um, always had similar uh, core personality traits. Just always, the character was just very much the same. And so we tested that a couple of times with a couple of different things, and we've discovered that proper nouns hold a lot of contextual weight with the AI. So going through and getting it to create systems and name those systems allows you to see what the default context of the AI is. And so then you have the opportunity to limit the amount of information you have to give it to maintain the context of your story, because all you have to do is tell it what you want to change about its default context. So, for example, when I had it create this half-elf character and it kept creating these adventurer characters, I went in and said that create this character, it's going to be a half-elf, it's going to have this name. In this world, half-elves are pacifists. And so just from that additional context, just by changing its default understanding of what a half-elf character is, then we changed the entire character and it stopped being an adventurer and it became an herbalist. So now all you have to do is just include that change in the default context of what it means to be a half-elf, and then you're going to again get that same character. And so just a small amount, right? Half-elf with this name, half-elves are pacifists. And now you've carried over the entirety of the context of who that character is. Um, for the AI. And so that's really going to help us create a deeper world without taking up all of the memory that the AI has to maintain a conversation, so that we're going to be able to get more of our story out before having to go and refresh that context so that we can write some more of the story. And that's going to be really, really important for us. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a look. Let's see where we were at here. Okay, so the thing that we stopped at last time was we developed a social structure for the elves, and we had it name that social structure, and it gave us 3 names, and we're actually going to use all 3 of these names to define our social structure so that we can bring all of the context of what the AI created here. And then we've got all of these names for the elven gods. So now we have a social structure, we have a pantheon of gods that they would believe in. Um, we know that there's a default context of what sort of is an elf, right? They have certain physical characteristics, they have certain typical um, certain typical personality traits, right? Based on the way their society is structured, they're going to act in a certain way. And now we just need to determine if there's anything we want to change about those defaults. So what are some ways that we could change elves from what you would expect in standard literature that would be interesting for us? So we've got religious beliefs, personality traits on a further might include wise and reserved, but also fiercely independent and protective of their homes and loved ones. They are often seen as having a deep understanding of the natural world, and they possess a strong sense of tradition and history. Elegant fingers, they're known for their grace and agility, as well as their sharp minds and keen senses. They possess connection to nature and are known for their love of outdoors. Pointed ears, slender humanoids, okay. Social structure we've already discussed. The history of the elves in our world involve a long and rich past, possibly dating back to the earliest days of the world's creation. They have a deep understanding of ancient magic and have coexisted with other races for centuries, possibly even millennia. They could have conflicts and alliances with other races, sharpening the world as we know it. We might try and add a little to this history context at some point, probably after we've developed the rest of our races a little bit. But primarily what I'm looking for is some stuff about personality traits, maybe some physical characteristics, and a little bit about the history that can be changed to create more interesting elves. Um, Also, we will go. So this is the context that's sort of the most important as we start building these sort of unrelated things, right? At this scope of our world building, all of our races are going to be sort of separated from each other. All of our um, we're not yet diving into the connections between different races or different kingdoms or different stuff like that. We're only really looking into the context of those things in a vacuum. And so we're just going to be building those things in that vacuum. So let's create a new chat and let's start working on our goblins. Let's work on our goblin race. Sure, in this fantasy world, the goblin race is known for their proficiency in rune magic. They have a deep understanding of the ancient runes and how to use them to cast spells. This has made them feared and respected by other races who do not possess the same level of mastery over rune magic. Goblin society is built around their ability to wield rune magic, with powerful goblin sorcerers serving as leaders and protectors. Okay, so this is interesting. When we built our elves, we just had this, and then we started talking about building the elven race. So let's change that. Let's just run the prompt like we did the last time, and then get it to talk about the elven or the goblin race. Available in this world, in the fantasy world, rune magic is the only form of magic that exists. Other forms of magic, such as elemental magic or divination, do not exist in this world. Runes are physical objects. In this fantasy world, runes are physical objects that can be found throughout the world. These runes can be carved into rocks, etched into metal, or even tattooed onto skin. Then can be found. They can also be found in ancient ruins and forgotten tomes. Runes are activated by specific incantations. In order to activate a rune, one must recite a specific incantation. These incantations are passed down through generations and are closely guarded secrets. Runes can be used for a variety of purposes. Runes can be used for a variety of purposes such as healing, protection, and even combat. They can also be used to create magical constructs such as golems or wards. Runes can be combined for powerful effects. When multiple runes are combined, they can create powerful effects that are greater than the sum of their individual parts. This allows for endless possibilities and endless combinations. Rune magic is a respected profession. In this fantasy world, rune magic is a respected profession. Those who can wield rune magic are highly sought after for their abilities and are often employed as healers, protectors, or even warriors. The world is filled with ancient ruins and forgotten tomes. The world is filled with the ancient ruins and forgotten tomes that contain powerful runes. These runes are often guarded by powerful creatures and are only accessible to the bravest and most skilled rune mages. This is just a basic outline of the rune magic system, but with all the elements in place, we can create a rich and diverse fantasy world with magic and adventure. Okay, let's start talking about the goblin race in our world. In this fantasy world, the goblin race is a fierce and cunning race known for their ability to wield rune magic. They are short in stature, with green skin and sharp teeth. They are often seen as the outcasts of society, as they are not well trusted by other races due to their reputation for being thieves and tricksters. Goblins are known for their ability to create powerful runes. They can be used for a variety of purposes, such as creating illusions, enhancing physical abilities, and even manipulating time. They are also skilled in the art of runesmithing, which involves creating and imbuing objects with magical properties. Despite their reputation as outcasts, goblins are respected for their abilities and are often employed as scouts, thieves, and spies. They are also known for their love of treasure and will often hoard precious objects and artifacts. Goblins live in small communities, often in the shadows of larger cities and towns. They are fiercely protective of their communities and will go to great lengths to defend them from outsiders. In our fantasy world, the goblins play an important role in the economy, as they are the only ones who can make and create powerful magic items that other races need, which also makes them valuable allies or enemies depending on the situation. I don't like the way it's viewing the context here, and I don't know why it's doing it this way. Maybe because I didn't include this. So let's edit this, and let's try going back to the old prompt. Goblins in our fantasy world are small in stature, typically standing between 3 to 4 feet tall. They have greenish-gray skin, pointed ears, and sharp teeth. They have a wiry build, and their fingers are elongated and nimble. They have excellent night vision and can see in the dark. Personality traits. Goblins in our fantasy world are cunning and resourceful. They are also known to be greedy and selfish, often hoarding treasure and valuables. They are also fiercely loyal to their own tribe and will fiercely protect their own kind. Goblins are also known as mischievous and enjoy playing pranks on others. Religious beliefs. Goblins in our fantasy world worship a deity known as the Goblin King. This deity is said to have created goblins and is said to reside in the deepest caves. Goblins believe that by appeasing the Goblin King, they will be granted wealth and prosperity. Societal structure. Goblins in our fantasy world live in tribes led by a chief. These tribes are usually isolated from one another and are fiercely territorial. Within the tribe there is a hierarchical structure, with a chief at the top, followed by the elders, and then the rest of the tribe. Brief history. Goblins in our fantasy world have always existed in the shadows of the larger races. They have been pushed to the fringes of society and have always had to fight for survival. However, they have always had a knack for finding treasure and valuable resources, which has helped them to survive in recent years. There have been reports of goblin tribes banding together to form larger communities and even kingdoms. This has led to increased conflicts with other races as goblins begin to assert their presence in the world. I really like this, the way it's built this history, and this will be something that I think we can lean into in the story. As far as the structure goes, I'm okay with this, but one of the things is it talks about they always have greenish gray skin and that they live underground. Or maybe it doesn't say that they live underground, but I don't like the greenish gray skin. I want to have all different colors of skin. So that'll be one change we're going to make for our goblins. Goblins don't just have green skin, they can have skin of any earth tone. Because I think that'll just make it more interesting. And then also I mean, that's fine. I like just having the Goblin King as a deity. I will just put Goblin deity is Goblin King. Okay, so now we have an understanding of the default context of our goblins, which means that anything that we want to change about that default context, that's all we have to input to the AI. Only changes to what the AI naturally thinks has to be input when we want to build the context for our story later. So this is all just inherently true information as far as the AI is concerned. And so anytime we bring up goblins in the future, this is just what the AI is going to believe. So there's no point to go beyond saying that goblins exist. So we will basically only have to add that they can have any earth tone skin color. And then we'll go ahead and make sure that we say explicitly that the deity is the Goblin King, because it's possible that it could have chosen a different pantheon of gods. Right, this could be one of those creative things that it might change, and so we want to make sure we say this is the pantheon we're choosing. But that'll really, really shrink the amount of information we have to get it when it gets time to start actually writing our story. The other thing we did with the elves was we had it describe in more detail the societal structure, and then give that societal structure a name. Again, we're trying to make it produce as many proper nouns as possible because of how much context the AI seems to generate with proper nouns, and how easy it is to carry over context by using proper nouns. So tell me more about the societal structure. Also, my absolute favorite thing about this AI is it doesn't care that I suck at spelling and verify you are a human. Yes, I'm a human. It doesn't care that I suck at spelling and that my sentence structures are just absolute garbage. It understands what I'm trying to say, and I love it for that. The societal structure of goblins in our fantasy world is centered around the tribe. Each tribe is led by a chief who is chosen by the tribe's elders. The chief is responsible for making decisions for the tribe and is also responsible for leading the tribe in battle. The chief is also the one who communicates with the Goblin King and performs the necessary rituals to appease the deity. The elders are the next in line in the hierarchy and are made up of the oldest and most experienced members of the tribe. They advise the chief and are also responsible for passing down knowledge and traditions to the next generation. The elders also hold the knowledge of the incantations and rituals needed to activate the runes. This was something I was actually going to add as context. As I started reading about the elders, I was thinking to myself, we should make them the most powerful rune mages in a goblin tribe, and here it is just going ahead and doing that for me. So I'm not going to have to add that context. That already has that context available. We'll just have to make sure that we tell it we're using this rune magic system. And we have goblins, and because we are adding the rune magic context, this is the default context it will have for Goblin Society. The rest of the tribe is made up of the common members. They are responsible for hunting and gathering food, as well as for building and maintaining the tribe's living quarters. They also serve as the backbone of the tribe's defense, serving as warriors in times of war. Within the tribe, there is also a division of labor. Some goblins specialize in hunting, others in crafting, and others in warfare. This division of labor allows the tribe to function efficiently and effectively. Overall, the societal structure of goblins in our fantasy world is based on survival and cooperation. The tribe works together to ensure their survival and prosperity with a clear hierarchy to provide leadership and guidance. The tribe also holds a strong sense of community and loyalty to their own kind. I like this take on goblins. It's a little more it seems to provide them with a little more humanity than I think a lot of typical fantasy worlds do. In your typical fantasy world, they're just sort of feral creatures that exist almost completely by instinct, and they're always extremely bloodthirsty and stuff like that. And I like to see that the default context here provides them with a little more humanity, because I'd like to see the goblin race in our story be a bigger part of the story. Maybe even one of the main characters in the story will end up being a goblin, or maybe they'll be interacting with goblins in a positive capacity instead of just always in a negative capacity. So we have our deities, we have our structure. What would you name this social structure? And now we want to give it a proper name. The Goblin tribe structure, as it is specific to the Goblin race and centers around the concept of tribe as a primary unit of organization and decision making. Okay, I like Goblin tribe structure. I'm just going to keep that. I'm going to put it in here as our societal structure. And now that we have that proper noun for the context, when we go to input additional context later, we can just say we've got goblins, they use this deity, they run this structure. Within this structure, something that's a little different is X. And then we can put whatever it is we decide to change in there as that X. And then it'll use this default context and then change that context based on what we say. Again, very important to find proper nouns to describe the things that the AI is sending you, because it ascribes all of this context to that proper noun. Now it's not remembering, right? You're not taking it to another chat and then it learned to ascribe that context to that proper noun. You're just getting it to tell you the proper noun that it already ascribed to that information, to that solution, because the AI really is solving the conversation you're having. Right? It's just like any other computer program, it's just doing math. So you're inputting a series of text, and then it's outputting its solution, which is its expectation of what a human being would say when given that same input of words. And so that solution doesn't really change, right? There's some random number generators and stuff thrown in there to provide some different words and some different creative flair, but the core of the information that it wants to provide based on what you're saying to it is already a solution, and it's not going to change. Just like 2 plus 2 always equals 4, a certain series of words is always going to output the same core knowledge and understanding. And so unless you string together a different set of words by providing different context, like our goblins are going to have all of the different colors of earth tones and not just greenish gray skin. Now when we supply that additional context on top of goblin, then we're going to get a new solution that includes that change in the words that we're using. So you want to learn the default understanding that the AI has, and then make the changes you want to make, and then provide that context so that it maintains continuity throughout your story. I just want to check something here. I've been having a conversation all day on Reddit about ChatGPT Pro and how that's going to change employment and stuff. So I just wanted to see if I had gotten any additional messages, because I do want to carry on that conversation at some point here today, because it is very important. All right. So we've gotten our Goblin Society. We've gotten their deities. We've got some information about their physical characteristics. We've made our selected change to their physical characteristics. So now we have elves. We have goblins. We still need to make our dwarves, our humans, our orcs, and our giants. I'm actually kind of interested in the giants, so I want to do the giants next, because I really want to see. I have a lot of fun learning about the default context that the AI has for things. It's like unfolding a story in and of itself. Well, I don't know what that means. Um, it's like unfolding a story in and of itself. And I really like to read, and I particularly really like to read fantasy stories. So it's sort of like getting to read a fantasy story instead of trying to write one, and that's very interesting to me. So you'll see the last time when we did the goblins, it gave us based on the context that we provided because we're always providing it. Oh darn, I broke it. We're always providing it this context of our magic system, and we're gonna have to delete this again. And because of that, it's constantly spitting out, right? Because it always wants to reply to everything that you say. It's going to continually spit out what it understands about this magic system to us. So in this world, runes are inscribed on objects. In this fantasy world, runes are inscribed on objects and can be activated by speaking a specific incantation. Runes can be inscribed on any object in this fantasy world. Runes can be inscribed on any object, including weapons, armor, and everyday items. Runes can have multiple effects. In this fantasy world, runes can have multiple effects, such as providing a magical shield or increasing the strength of a weapon. Rune magic is limited by the number of runes inscribed. In this fantasy world, the power of the rune magic is limited by the number of runes inscribed on an object. Runes can be inscribed by anyone. In this fantasy world, runes can be inscribed by anyone, but the skill of the inscriber affects the power of the rune. So in this fantasy world, rune magic is widely available and versatile form of magic that can be inscribed on any object by anyone, but the power and effect of the magic are determined by the number and skill of the runes inscribed. So that's very similar context to what we've had previously. And so now we're going to say, let's talk about the giant race in our world. And we're going to go back to our goblins here, and we're going to get this formatting that we used previously. Oh, let's talk about the giant race in our world. Then we're going to dump that formatting in there. Then we're going to get information about our giants. The giant race in our fantasy world are physically very large and imposing. With an average height of around 15 feet tall, they have a sturdy muscular build and thick, rough skin. They typically have long, wild hair and beards, and their eyes are often a deep, piercing blue or green. Personality-wise, the giant race is known for being stoic and reserved. They are fiercely loyal to the family and tribe, and they value strength and honor above all else. They have a strong sense of tradition and respect for their ancestors. They are slow to anger, but when they do, they are formidable. They are also known for their wisdom and their deep understanding of the natural world. Religiously, the giant race has a deep reverence for the earth and the natural world. They believe that everything in the world is connected, and that the spirits of the earth, sky, and sea must be honored and respected. They often perform rituals and make offerings to these spirits to ensure the well-being of their tribe. I like very much that this is not just going to be an entirely um, pantheon deity driven religious system for uh, every race that we build. They're all looking like they're having slightly different religions. And of course, elves, dwarves, and humans will probably follow that very specific pantheon of deities format. But goblins having just the Goblin King, and now giants using a more ethereal spirit as opposed to a physical deity. I really like having different religious concepts going on. Society, the giant race is organized into tight-knit tribes that are led by a chieftain. Each tribe is fiercely independent and fiercely protective of their own territory. They have a strong tradition of storytelling, music, and other forms of art. The giant race is also known for their skill in metalworking, stonemasonry, and crafting weapons. In terms of history, the giant race is said to have been created by the Earth Spirit and have been in existence for as long as the mountains and the sea. They have a deep understanding of the land and have been living in harmony with nature for thousands of years. They have had conflicts with other races in the past, but have always managed to maintain their independence and autonomy. So here is something where I want to make, I think, some pretty considerable changes. This paints giants as this sort of reclusive and tribal sort of race. And what I would rather see, I think, is to portray them as sort of this nomadic and I don't want to say peacekeeping, but maybe nomadic and ambassadorial. I don't know, but sort of these nomadic ambassadors, right? And so there might not be a ton of giants. Maybe there's only 50 giants in the entire world. They might be an extremely small race, but they travel around and they visit all the different lands, and they're welcome and accepted everywhere. And so they tend to sort of be ambassadors to everyone, and just wherever there's a giant, you just sort of go and seek advice with that giant about the different tribes of the world because they've gone and visited them all and they know all about all of them because they're accepted everywhere. Um, so something we will change about giant society is that they are not reclusive or tribal. Instead, they are nomadic, traveling in familial or small groups throughout the world. They are accepted by all races and all kingdoms and often act as ambassadors. I don't know how to spell ambassadors, whatever, doesn't matter. Alright, so something we would change about giant society. That sounds interesting. With this change, the giant race would be a more integrated and visible presence in the fantasy world. They would be known for their nomadic lifestyle, traveling in small familiar or group throughout the world. They are accepted by all races and all kingdoms and often act as ambassadors, mediating disputes and building bridges between different cultures. Their societal structure would likely adapt to their nomadic way of life, becoming more flexible and less centralized. They would have a strong sense of community and support within their own small groups, but they would also have the ability to easily integrate with and adapt to new societies. Their religious beliefs and practices would probably also reflect their nomadic lifestyle, with a focus on honoring and respecting the spirits of the land, sky, and sea wherever they go. As ambassadors, their wisdom and understanding of the natural world would be greatly respected and valued by all races. They would be known for their ability to resolve disputes and maintain peace between different cultures. They would also be able to act as trading intermediaries and bring new goods and ideas from different parts of the world. I didn't even think about that. Overall, this change would make the giant race an important and respected part of the fantasy world, known for their nomadic way of life and their role as ambassadors and mediators. Alright, what would you call this societal structure? Society structure of the giant race is described to be referred to as a nomadic tribal society or nomadic confederacy. This societal structure is characterized by a lack of central governing body. Instead, it is composed of small, autonomous groups that move around frequently and are bound together by a shared culture, history, and sense of community. They form a confederacy of these groups where they come together for specific purposes such as trade, diplomacy, and resolving disputes. This type of societal structure is also called clans or tribes in more broader perspective. I like the idea of nomadic confederacy. I think that almost describes exactly what I'm looking for here. So we're going to punch that in for our giants. Giants are a nomadic confederacy. And that will help with our context. I'm also going to copy and paste over just what I put in here. It's a relatively small bit of information, and I can always parse it down to something easier to deal with for the AI. But I want to make sure that I have that context available because this is very specifically what I'm looking for. So even if I have to include everything that I wrote here, which I'll probably spell check it at some point, um, then we can make sure that we maintain this context so giants in our world are always going to end up looking like this. All right. I really like that. The other thing is maybe it would be interesting to do more of a tabletop RPG version of giants and have them look, with like a skin color and an eye color, maybe even hair colors that relate to an elemental spirit, right? We've got the spirits of wind, earth, and sea, or sky, earth, and sea. Maybe giants take on physical attributes to associate with one of those spirits. I also actually think just now I want to include a spirit of fire in the giant religion. Because I'm a big fan of just the four elemental format. I like it. It's an extremely common fantasy trope, and I'm happy to continue it. All right. Nothing going on in Reddit still. Sad day for me. Hmm. I don't know about that physical characteristic thing. I kind of like it. Maybe not. And then this is going to change. Actually, the history of the Giants' default context is going to change a lot based on the societal changes. But we don't necessarily need to observe that to really understand how that change is going to occur. It it almost feels like this is going too quickly and too easily, right? It's if you were sitting down and trying to hash out what you wanted giants in your world to be like, you would you would have to honestly sit down and think about all of these different things that the AI just has this natural default context for. But even beyond that, even if you wanted to make huge sweeping changes to what the AI is putting out, it already does such a good job of building the structure for how you would look at a race. I mean, I know we have it follow this format and that's great, but it already builds out so much of what you should be looking at and gives so many ideas that even if you wanted to make huge changes, it would still speed up your process so much to just chit chat with the AI about it, right? If I wanted to make huge changes, right? We made a change to the societal structure of giants here, and it gave us all of this wonderful context, right? This is more than enough to get a basic understanding of how your characters of this race are going to be interacting, right? Or how a character that might be half giant, half something else, might be torn between two societal structures, and really have this difficulty with living in two distinctly different worlds and how those two different worlds might interact with each other. So it's really, really exciting to be able to build so much context so quickly and to be able to look at so many different options, right? Because if I don't like this, we can punch something else in here, right? It takes nothing. This is a 2 sentence prompt, and we can look at a whole new societal concept And so it really allows you to observe the end of your creative thought quicker, right? And to get through, and it's like doing a brainstorming session with another person to really flesh out your ideas, and it just happens so fast. It's the first time that your thoughts can really be kept up with, right? Because if you were Googling and looking stuff up and things like that, trying to understand what other people typically think of what it is to be a giant, and trying to find the general um, accepted ideologies behind these fantasy races, you would have to go through Google page after Google page after Google page to get that understanding. And here it just exists immediately. And it's not necessarily like that for everything, but especially with creative stuff like this, it's really, really easy to start pulling information together. And I really, really enjoy it. It is extremely exploratory. You feel like you're discovering things very, very quickly. You're getting a real deep understanding of things very, very quickly. And it just brings a lot of excitement to the experience. So now we're going to be moving on. And actually, I think we're going to move on. We had another individual in here earlier. It says right now that nobody's in here, but I do want to talk about the other goal of this particular stream, and that is to have a conversation about ChatGPT Pro and how AI assistants like ChatGPT are going to be changing employment in the future, and how we have to start looking now to how we're going to react to that, especially as uh, workers, how we're going to be reacting to those changes so that we can make sure that we share in the benefits that ChatGPT is going to create. Sort of a hallmark of the last 50 or so years, particularly here in the United States, right? I live in the US. And so that's where most of my understanding of the world's current economic status comes from. But in the last 50 years here in the US, a lot of increased productivity, or the profits from a lot of increased productivity, have been captured by the capitalist class in the United States. And so what that means is people have been getting more and more productive because of the tools available to complete work of all types. Over the past 50 or so years, the average employee has become almost twice as productive, or a little more than twice as productive as they were, say, 50 years ago. However, wages have stagnated during that time, which means that all of the increase in productivity that comes from these tools, and these new abilities that we gain because of these tools, is being captured by the people who own businesses, and is not being shared at all by the people who are working there. Which means that we are giving up a larger and larger percentage of our labor as profit to that small number of owners. So whereas maybe 20% of your labor was going as profit to owners before, if your productivity is doubled, but your compensation has stayed the same, then you're now giving up more than 50% of your labor as profit to that owner class. And that's creating a huge gap in income, and contributing to the drastic income inequality that we see today. And so That has happened over the course of 50 years, 5 decades it's taken to reach that double productivity number. However, in a lot of industries today, ChatGPT will be able to almost overnight create that doubling of productivity, right? And maybe this particular model isn't the one to do it. Maybe we're going to need ChatGPT 4 or a different model from a different company or something like that, but we're seeing how extraordinarily powerful ChatGPT and AI assistants like it are in white collar spaces right now. And so instead of a 5 decade crawl to these productivity increases, we're going to see an overnight change of that magnitude. And that is extremely disruptive. And if we don't ensure that our compensation is tied to that increase in productivity, whether it be that we make the same amount of money and work fewer hours so that we're being compensated with more free time without losing pay, or if we're being compensated with more pay even though we're being expected to work the same number of hours, whatever it is, we need to be sharing in the benefits of that productivity increase. And it is extremely important to start making that the norm right now, because AI assistants aren't going away. They are going to get more powerful. They are going to broaden their reach into more industries. They are going to be useful for everything. And I mean for everything. I mean planning construction work. I mean city planning. I mean white collar jobs. I mean even creating um, better flow in fast food restaurants so that employees can have an easier time getting around, right? Knowing where to put specific items because of how often they're used and optimizing stuff like that. I know that is already done, and that we already have tools that we use to do that optimization, but this is going to even be able to get it down to a per employee level, right? So maybe one employee has a tendency to look right for things that are important to them, and another employee has a tendency to look left. And so creating a modular kitchen where the employee who's going to be standing at the grill doing the cooking during that shift can just go in and quick swap a couple of modules so that certain things are in certain places and it's really easy to get it organized, and then increase your productivity at that station by 10, 15, 20% every one of your shifts. Those are things that are going to be possible with AI assistants because they're going to be able to observe the the tendencies of each employee and then output those improvements. Of course, by that time, maybe we'll just only have robots working in fast food restaurants. I don't know. But what I'm talking about here is that, people are harping really hard on how this is going to disrupt white collar work, but it's going to disrupt all kinds of work. And it's going to disrupt it in huge ways where you're going to see anywhere from, a 50% increase in productivity, maybe to a 3, 4, 500% increase in productivity, especially when it comes to things like code writing, when it comes to things like content generation for, websites, for social medias and stuff like that. If you're a social media director, you're going to be able to see a huge increase in your productivity based on these systems. And so we just need to make sure that that productivity increase is directly associated with our compensation, because we cannot let so much value be captured by so few people. Right? It has to be spread out. If you're getting more work done, you should be getting paid more, because it's not about the number of hours you spend working. It's about the value of the product you produce. And we know that's true because efficiency is not about getting more people to do more things for more time. Right? Efficiency is about getting the fewest number of people possible to spend the smallest amount of time possible to get something accomplished. And so we know that the value there is in the product, not in the time spent on the product. And so you have to ensure that if you're getting that product out faster, ultimately you're making the company more money, you share in that. It's very important. So that's my little rant for the day, my little ethics thing. But I think it's a super important one, and it's probably something we're going to come back to more than once over the course of the next weeks or months or whatever. Because I don't want to see the trends of the last 5 decades continue, especially with systems that are as disruptive as AI assistants. Okay. I think instead of doing any more world building, I think what we're going to do, something I always have fun with, is we're just going to get some stories created. Right? We've got this understanding of what goblins and stuff are. So maybe we'll just have it tell me some stories about some goblins. So tell me the story of the greatest historical goblin rune mage. Once upon a time in a fantasy world where rune magic is the only type of magic and goblins are small creatures with greenish gray skin and pointed ears, there lived a goblin named Zog. Zog was a young goblin who had always been fascinated by the ancient runes and the power they held. He spent his days studying the runes and learning the incantations that were passed down from the elders of his tribe. As he grew older, Zog became more and more skilled in the art of rune magic. He began to experiment with different runes and incantations, and soon he discovered that he had a talent for combining runes in new and powerful ways. Word of Zog's abilities soon spread throughout the goblin tribes, and he became known as the greatest rune mage in the land. He was sought after by tribes all over the world who asked him to come and teach the secrets of the rune magic. With his newfound fame and wealth, Zog set out to explore the world and discover new runes. He traveled to ancient ruins and forgotten tomes, searching for the most powerful runes in existence. He also began to study a Goblin King, the deity the goblins worshipped, and he discovered that the Goblin King was not just a god, but also a powerful being that was capable of granting immense power to those who pleased him. As Zog's power grew, so did his ambition. He began to dream of uniting all the goblin tribes under one banner and creating a goblin kingdom. He set out to achieve his goal using his knowledge of rune magic to defeat rival tribes and gain their loyalty. In the end, Zog succeeded in his goal, and he became the first goblin king. Under his rule, the goblin tribes prospered, and his kingdom became a place of great wealth and power. He also became a powerful leader and a respected figure among the other races, who were fascinated by his knowledge of rune magic and his devotion to the Goblin King. Zog's legacy lived on long after his death, and his kingdom became a powerful and respected nation in the world. He is still remembered today as the greatest goblin rune mage in history, a powerful leader, and a true master of the ancient runes. This is what I'm talking about. At any point during your world building, you can just stop and learn a little bit about your world. This'll never be, well, this could be part of the story, but it doesn't have to be part of the story. It may never be part of the story. Nobody else in the entire world may ever read it, except for you. But it's fun. And it gives your world a lived-in feel. When you're writing about your world, and you've got all these little tidbits rattling around in your brain, it just makes it easier to express what you're trying to show in your world when you've got a better understanding of it. Now I'd like to learn, what was Zog's greatest spell? What was the greatest spell Zog ever created? We didn't give it the context of the specific runes that we use, so it might do something a little wonky. This is the Rune of Unity, and I actually might go ahead and add Unity to the rune list if it's not already in there, because that'll be really interesting. So the greatest spell that Zog ever created was known as the Rune of Unity. This spell was a combination of several powerful runes, each imbued with its unique properties. The spell had the ability to unite all the goblin tribes under one banner and create a sense of unity and loyalty among the goblins. The spell was activated by reciting an ancient incantation that Zog had discovered in one of his explorations. The incantation was in an ancient goblin dialect, and it was said that only those who truly believed in the power of the Goblin King could recite it correctly. When the spell was activated, a bright light would emanate from the runes, and it would create a powerful energy that would spread throughout the land. This energy would create a sense of unity and loyalty among the goblins, making them more willing to work together and put aside their differences. The spell also had a secondary effect of increasing the power of the Goblin King, and it was said that the Goblin King would grant immense power to those who pleased him. This made Zog an even more powerful leader, and it helped him to achieve his goal of uniting all the goblin tribes under one banner. The Rune of Unity was considered as the greatest spell ever created in the Goblin's history. It was the spell that allowed Zog to unite the goblin tribes and create a powerful goblin kingdom. It was also the spell that made Zog the most powerful goblin rune mage in history, and his legacy lived on long after his death. That's just super interesting. I love learning about this world. I, I can't say it enough. It's just so much fun to tinker with stuff. Um, okay, so we got it to tell me about some great mage. Tell me a story of the most cunning goblin ever. This will be interesting. Wonder if it'll tell me about Zog again. Once upon a time, in a fantasy world where goblins roamed the land, there was a goblin unlike any other. He was known as Gritnock, the cunning goblin. Gritnock was born into a small tribe of goblins deep in the mountains. He was always different from the other goblins. He was always asking questions and always trying to find new ways of doing things. As Gritnock grew older, he became more and more fascinated by the runes that his tribe used to cast spells. He spent all his free time studying the runes and experimenting with different combinations. His tribe's elders saw his potential and began to teach him the incantations and rituals needed to activate the runes. Gritnock quickly surpassed his peers and became the most powerful rune mage in his tribe. He used his knowledge to help his tribe prosper, creating magical constructs to help with hunting and building, and using his runes to protect his tribe from danger. But Gritnock's ambition didn't stop there. He longed for more power and more wealth, so he began to explore the ancient runes and forgotten tomes that dotted the land, searching for powerful runes that would give him the power he craved. Sorry. It was on one of these expeditions that Gritnock discovered the fabled Rune of Wealth. This ancient rune was said to be able to turn any object into gold. Gritnock knew that with this rune he could become the wealthiest goblin in the land. Gritnock returned to his tribe and shared his discovery with the chief, but the chief was greedy and wanted the rune for himself. Gritnock knew that he had to act fast if he wanted to keep the rune for himself, so he rallied his fellow tribe members and overthrew the chief. With the Rune of Wealth in his possession, Gritnock became the new chief of the tribe. Under Gritnock's leadership, the tribe prospered like never before. They used the Rune of Wealth to turn everything they could find into gold. They built grand palaces and filled them with treasure. Gritnock's fame spread far and wide, and soon other goblin tribes came to him seeking his guidance and help. Gritnock became the leader of a powerful goblin kingdom, and his name was known and respected throughout the land. He had become the most cunning goblin ever, using his intelligence, ambition, and knowledge of rune magic to achieve great wealth and power. He lived a long and prosperous life, and his legacy lived on after his death, as he had taught the incantations and rituals to his children and those who were close to him, so the tribe could keep using the Rune of Wealth to remain wealthy and powerful for generations to come. Again, another wonderful story. A common thread you'll see here, we're asking for the most cunning goblin ever. So you're going to see similar words being used to describe the different goblins. Right? They're always extremely fast learners. They're always extremely ambitious. They always go on adventures into ancient tombs and ruins and stuff like that, because that's just how you become famous, right? You if all you did was, well, I don't want to say all you did because obviously it has to be done. But if you're a farmer, right, and you do the exact same thing as every other farmer, and you go out every day and you do your farming tasks, and then you go back home and you go to sleep, then you're not the most cunning. You're not going to be written in history books. There are a certain series of activities that are generally required to be a historical figure, particularly in, or especially in, fantasy settings. So when you start asking the AI to generate these stories for you, right, you're going to see these common threads. But those common threads would appear if you were just reading fantasy books as well. So instead of getting the story of the most cunning goblin ever, let's get a story of. Tell me the story of a day in the life of a goblin farmer. And let's just see how it changes the story because we're giving it this everyman context. So, the day of a goblin farmer begins early. As the sun rises over the tribe's village, the goblin farmer named Grib wakes up to the sound of his rooster crowing and stretches his wiry frame. He quickly gets dressed and heads out to his farm, which is located on the outskirts of the village. As Grib makes his way to his farm, he passes by the other goblin farmers who are also making their way to their farms. They exchange greetings and a few jokes as they walk. Grib's farm is small, but it is well maintained and produces enough food to feed his family and the rest of the tribe. Once Grib reaches his farm, he begins his daily routine. He starts by checking on his crops, making sure that they are healthy and that there are no pests or diseases. He also checks on his livestock, making sure that they have enough food and water. After Grib finishes his morning chores, he takes a break to have breakfast with his family. They sit together and enjoy a simple meal of bread and cheese, along with some fresh fruits and vegetables from the farm. After breakfast, Grib heads back to his farm to continue working. He spends the rest of the morning tending to his crops, weeding, and harvesting. By midday, the sun is high in the sky and Grib is covered in sweat. He takes a break to rest and have lunch. In the afternoon, Grib continues his work on the farm. He spends the afternoon plowing the fields and planting new crops. As the sun begins to set, Grib finishes his work for the day and heads back to the village. As Grib makes his way back to the village, he stops by the market to sell some of his produce. He greets the other goblin farmers and merchants, exchanging news and gossip. After selling his produce, Grib heads home to have dinner with his family, and then goes to bed, exhausted but content after a long day of hard work on his farm. This is just an example of a day in the life of a goblin farmer, but it shows how they work hard to ensure that their tribe is fed, the importance of cooperation and community. Goblin farmers are essential for the survival of their tribe, and their hard work and dedication are respected and appreciated by their fellow tribe members. So, once you sort of get out of this idea of wanting to learn about the most important people in your world, this is a story that would never make it into a book, right? This is just Grib. Grib is just a farmer. But as a world builder, stories like this can be extremely important for informing you about the world that your characters, or if you're running a tabletop RPG, your players are living in. Right? This story about Grib is really a story about every goblin farmer they will ever meet. And so now you have this context of what that day might look like, what they might be doing at any given point during that day. And so it just informs everything that you're going to be portraying either in this tabletop game or in your book or story. Um, let's see. We know that our rune magic system um, is part of the context we've given the AI here. We haven't given it our runes, but what is or what are some of the rune spells Grib uses in his work? And let's just see what it spits out for us. As a goblin farmer, Grib likely uses a variety of rune spells to aid him in his work. Some examples of runes he might use include Fertility Rune. This rune is used to increase the fertility of the soil and ensure a bountiful harvest. It is often used before planting new crops. A Protection Rune. This rune is used to protect the crops and livestock from pests and disease. It creates an invisible barrier that keeps unwanted creatures away. The Weather Rune. This rune is used to control the weather and to ensure that the crops receive the right amount of sun and rain. It is also used to protect the crops from harsh weather conditions. The Healing Rune. This rune is used to heal any injuries or illnesses that the livestock may have. It also may be used to heal any injuries Grib may have sustained while working on the farm. The Harvest Rune. This rune is used to increase the yield of the crops and to ensure that they are ripe and ready for harvest at the right time. And the Water Rune. This rune is used to bring water to the crops and to ensure that they have enough water to grow. These are just a few examples of the types of runes that Grib the Goblin Farmer might use in his work. The rune magic system in our fantasy world offers endless possibilities and combinations, so there could be any other runes that Grib uses depending on his needs. And also the knowledge of incantations and rituals that he holds. So again, just some really interesting context that we get to discover about our world, right? This isn't something we had to come up with ourselves. It's not something we created. Because as world builders, as writers, one of the things that is a hallmark of these hobbies is that we also very much like to read. And while building a story and going back and editing it involves a lot of reading, that's not necessarily the kind of reading that you would tend to enjoy, right? You want to read for discovery. You want to read for entertainment. You want to explore a world, and that's why reading is so much fun, is because you get to explore this world. And when using an AI assistant, you get to do a lot of that while creating the world that your story is going to live in. And so I know that there's a lot of hate going on about using AI assistants as some sort of cheating, but it really is a different kind of experience, and it feels like just pure creation and pure exploration when you get to interact with an AI assistant like this to build a world. It's it's a whole different perspective on what you're creating when it's done this way. Sorry, I gotta get some water. All right. Um, we also did some giants, and we actually changed a pretty big thing about giant society. So let's go back and here is probably the best spot because we want to make sure we save the context. Let's learn a story about giants, but let's not learn a story about a single giant individual. Let's learn a story about an event in giant history. So tell me the story of how the giants brokered peace between the humans, elves, and dwarves. Well, let's see what happens. Long ago, in the fantasy world, tensions were high between the humans, elves, and dwarves. They had been at odds with each other for centuries. Small skirmishes had become a regular occurrence. The three races were deeply mistrustful of each other, and a full-scale war seemed inevitable. It was at this time that the giants, known for their wisdom and understanding of the natural world, stepped in to broker peace between the three races. They traveled to each of the kingdoms and met with the leaders of the humans, elves, and dwarves. They listened to the grievances of each side and slowly began to build a sense of understanding and empathy between the different races. The giants used their natural ability to resolve disputes and maintain peace, and they were able to successfully broker peace between the three races. They proposed a treaty, signed by all leaders, that established a council of representatives from each race to work together to resolve conflicts and maintain peace. The treaty was accepted by all parties, and the Council of Representatives has been meeting regularly ever since to address issues and maintain peace. The giants were appointed as the council's mediators, and their wisdom and understanding of the natural world helped to keep the peace between the three races. The giants were hailed as heroes, and their wisdom and understanding of the natural world was respected by all races. They were honored by the council and remembered as the ones who brought peace to the land. They were also able to offer their services as traders and intermediaries, which helped to increase trade and cultural exchange between the three races. Thanks to the giants' efforts, the fantasy world has been at peace for centuries, and the three races live in harmony, learning from each other and working together for the betterment of the land. Again, this is not a story that you would put in your book. It's written very almost childishly with how overly positive and repetitive it is, but it provides a context and creates something that could be used in your world, right? This council that meets and has giant advisors or mediators could be an important part of this world that would have taken serious consideration to get to, and now can have more consideration applied to it. So now we have this idea of this council. Uh, tell me more about the council and its giant mediators. And now we can just expand on that. That was an interesting thing that I want to know more about. Tell me more about it. Give me some more ideas. The Council of Representatives that was established as a result of the treaty between the humans, elves, and dwarves is a body of representatives from each race. These representatives are appointed by the leaders of their respective kingdoms and are responsible for addressing issues that arise between the different races and maintaining peace. The council meets regularly, typically on a monthly basis, in a neutral location that is easily accessible to representatives from all the races. The meetings are chaired by the giant mediators, who are responsible for keeping the proceedings of the council orderly and ensuring that all voices are heard. The giant mediators are appointed by the council and are chosen for their wisdom and understanding of the natural world. They are responsible for facilitating discussions and resolving disputes between representatives of the different races. They also provide guidance and advice to the Council on matters related to peace and diplomacy. Giant mediators are also responsible for enforcing the treaty and ensuring that all parties adhere to its terms. They have the authority to impose sanctions on any race that violates the treaty, such as trade embargoes or other forms of economic penalties. That's an interesting little tidbit because as a nomadic race and as facilitators of trade due to that nomadic nature and because they're widely accepted by all the other races, being able to impose sanctions and trade embargoes is actually really easy for the giants because I would imagine they are a huge part of trade all around the entire world that we're building. So that is a wonderful little tidbit of information that could again have some sort of expression in the end product that we create. The giant mediators are held in high regard by all the races, and their decisions are considered binding. They are able to offer their services as traders and intermediaries, sorry, which help to increase trade and cultural exchange between the three races. Their role in maintaining peace and resolving disputes has been instrumental in ensuring that the fantasy world remains a peaceful place. The Council and its giant mediators have been successful in avoiding any major conflict between the three races for centuries and continue to work towards their betterment of the land. Okay, well that's a little bit of an odd way to word that, but that's fine. You gotta get some more water. Okay, so we've learned about how this council came to be, and we've learned about what the council does. Now I want to get to a little bit more of the darker side of what um, governments and political systems like this generate. And that's that somebody is always trying to curry favor. And so now I want to get told, tell me a story about a king trying to buy influence in the council. Trying to buy influence in the council by bribing the mediators. Hopefully this will give us an interesting story. Once there was a king of the human kingdom who sought to gain more influence in the Council of Representatives. He believed that by increasing his kingdom's presence in the council, he could secure more favorable trade agreements and better protect his kingdom's interests. However, he found that the council was not easily swayed by his arguments, and the other representatives were not swayed by his position. The king, growing frustrated, decided to take matters into his own hands. He began to offer bribes to the giant mediators, hoping that they would use their influence to sway the council in his kingdom's favor. He offered them gold, jewels, and other valuable gifts in exchange for their support. However, the giant mediators were wise and could not be swayed by such materialistic temptations. They saw through the king's attempts to bribe them and immediately reported the matter to the council. The council was shocked and disappointed by the king's actions, and they took action to reprimand the king. The council imposed a heavy fine on the king's kingdom, which had to be paid in full in order to regain his status as a member of the council. The king was also banned from attending any council meetings for a period of time. This served as a warning to other leaders that bribery and corruption would not be tolerated. The giant mediator's integrity was crucial in maintaining peace and resolving disputes among the different races. Their reputation as impartial and fair mediators was vital to the council's effectiveness, and the king's attempt to bribe them had put this at risk. The council's action was a clear indication that they would not compromise on their principles and would always act in the best interests of all races. The king learned his lesson, and from that day on, he always acted in the best interest of his kingdom and the council without resorting to corrupt means. The council continued to work towards the betterment of the land, and the giant mediators continued to be respected and honored by all races. One of the things that the AI does often do is it wants to have a happy ending, but you can overcome that. For example, we've got this story here. In this story, let's have one of the giants accept the bribes and don't have a happy ending. So we can get a much grittier version of this story if we want to. So once there was a king of the human kingdom who sought to gain more influence in the Council of Representatives. He believed that by increasing his kingdom's presence in the council, he could secure more favorable trade agreements and better protect his kingdom's interest. However, he found that the council was not easily swayed by his arguments, and the other representatives were not swayed by his position. The king, growing frustrated, decided to take matters into his own hands. He began to offer bribes to the giant mediators, hoping that they would use their influence to sway the council in his kingdom's favor. He offered them gold, jewels, and other valuable gifts in exchange for their support. Unfortunately, one of the giant mediators, tempted by the wealth and power, accepted the king's bribes. The giant mediator, began to use his influence within the council to push for decisions that favored the human kingdom, often at the expense of the elves and dwarves. The other representatives soon grew suspicious of the giant mediator's actions and began to question his impartiality. The council's effectiveness was compromised, and tensions between the races began to rise once again. The council's reputation was damaged, and their ability to maintain peace was put at risk. The giant mediator's actions were eventually exposed, and the council was forced to take action. The giant mediator was removed from his position, and the council imposed heavy sanctions on the human kingdom. The king was banned from attending any council meetings for a period of time. The council's reputation was severely damaged by the actions of the corrupt giant mediator, and it took a long time for the council to regain the trust of the other races. The giant mediator's actions had serious consequences, and the council's ability to maintain peace was affected. The council's integrity and reputation were vital to the stability and prosperity of the fantasy world, and the giant mediator's actions had put it at risk. Now, again, we're getting repetitive things like giant mediator and the fantasy world. This is just because of the way I structured the prompts. It could be done differently if you named the world and then constantly used that name in your prompts instead. If you said, write stories about the giant mediators, give the giants names, then it would name the characters instead of calling them giant mediator over and over and over again. And that would give a lot more readability to your stories. But because we're just doing this for world building purposes, it's not necessary to make it publicly consumable. I mean, I guess because I'm doing it on stream, it might need to be publicly consumable. But it's not necessary if you're doing this yourself as part of developing a story or a world for a tabletop RPG or something like that. Um, just know that some of the stuff that you're hearing as you read through these stories, and sometimes you're going to think, well, that story is not very good. Some of the reason you don't think it's good is because of that repetition of certain things like that. And if you take that out of the equation and look at the meat of the stories that you're reading, there's a lot of decent information or even really good information to pull from those stories for your world. So don't let some of that repetition sort of, um, gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? Don't let that repetition sour you to what the rest of the story has to offer. So we've been going at this for about an hour and a half now. I think I'm going to call it for the day. I think an hour and a half is good. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will continue with some more world building and ultimately getting this to write a long form story for us in the coming days or weeks. Thanks for your time.